You all know it started in March 2009 in Mexico and spread over a period of just 2 to 3 months, almost all over the globe. December 2009, when we were in the midst of this pandemic, almost the whole all the continents globally it was there. In February 2010, it was declared that now we have reached the post-pandemic period. And post-pandemic means the pandemic alert that everything went off. And what you notice here is, amongst some of our Asian neighbors, Southeast Asia, H1N1 decreased, but it was taken over by influenza B. However, in India, H1N1 still predominated with some influenza B cropping up. Now, this is data which is just 2 weeks back, 29th January 2011. What we see is we are all surrounded by countries where influenza B in fact becomes more predominant, though H1N1 also continues. And this is Indian region, and you see again predominant influenza B, some non-typable A seasonal, plus H1N1 which has decreased. Till date, we have about 200,000 patients analyzed, tested for influenza, and 94% recovered. That means a mortality of 6%. If you compare it with the global mortality, which was just 1.5%, it seems that probably in India we had a high mortality, but it is not true, because in India we tested only category 3 or very serious patients, so that is why our mortality is a little more. And this was because of the non-availability of the test easily across the country. The weekly data we now see, we are in the post-pandemic period and there is not much influenza activity, but that doesn't mean that the influenza doesn't exist in the country. As clinicians, you all know that influenza is disastrous if you have some underlying comorbid conditions, and notably heart-lung diseases or metabolic disorders, including pregnancy. So in fact, one has to be wary of all these children who have comorbid conditions. If they get influenza, then it is a catastrophic. We do know that the mortality with influenza is more during the extremes of the age, but what we noted particularly in H1N1 pandemic was, it was more between 10 and 30 years, which were really the productive years of life. So this is a lesson which we have learned from H1N1 pandemic. I just show you some very recent Indian data, which is some of which is not published but was presented very recently in Hong Kong. This was September 2010. This is again by NIV Pune, where they say that mortality because of H1N1 in India is more than what is globally reported, but I have given you the reasons for that. A study from rural community in Delhi, done by All India Institute. If you see pandemic phase, which was till January 10, and followed by post-pandemic phase, though we had predominantly H1N1 in the pandemic phase, but that doesn't mean we did not have other influenza. We had influenza seasonal H3N2 and seasonal H1N1, which was not 2009 pandemic, thereby indicating that co-circulation of these multiple influenza virus did exist in this country. There have been regional variations. However, it is important to note whether it was H1N1 pandemic or H1N1 seasonal or influenza B. The clinical presentation, the mortality, morbidity has almost been the same kind of a pattern. From Pune pandemic data, this H1N1 pandemic was the predominant, yet we had about 22.19% seasonal influenza A and with some influenza B. Studies from Srinagar, during the pandemic period, we had circulation of 73% for H1N1, and out of this 27% were H3N2, again seasonal A. So thereby meaning that there has been a co-circulation of other seasonal H1N1, pandemic H1N1 and influenza B. Again, studies from Eastern India. We have a co-circulation which has been there both during the pandemic period as well as the post-pandemic period. However, in the post-pandemic period, 44% pandemic H1N1 with H3N2 very little. So therefore, I have just shown you the global update as it exists today. And that is why I changed my topic to, rather than H1N1, which is just now 30 to 40%, I should be talking more of pediatric influenza, some lessons we have learnt, and what are the key issues which probably we should be remembering as critical care physicians or pediatricians in general. Children are very important as far as influenza is concerned because they are the primary vectors as well as the chief disseminators. Whether it is the other family members, other children in school or other homes, institutions, or the community. And in all these groups, what we have a sizable chunk of population which has got underlying comorbid conditions. So if you protect the children, what happens is you get kind of a herd immunity in the community. And because of this herd immunity means that if the children in a community are protected, even the adults and elderly would be escaping the disease because the children are the ones who are disseminating this disease. The second issue, which probably is not worth discussing today, is monovalent or trivalent. I have clearly shown you when we have an influenza spectrum consisting of B, seasonal H1N1, pandemic H1N1, it doesn't make any sense to just immunize with monovalent H1N1. So it has to be a trivalent vaccine, whether killed vaccine, which we have access to, and the live vaccine, which is not yet available in India. And in this 2010-2011, there has been a good match between the vaccine available and the strains circulating, so that is not an issue. Safety, influenza vaccines are extremely safe, except I would say just 1 per million increase in Guillain-Barré syndrome, but it is not a very high price to be paid when we talk of innumerable hospitalizations and mortality because of influenza. So yes, definite association with GBS, but I would say it is minuscule. Efficacy, all these killed vaccines, the trivalent one have an efficacy of about 70 to 80% in children beyond 2 years. And below that it drops down to about 55 to 60%. Live attenuated vaccine is about 85 to 92% better, but again it has certain reservations, cannot be given in children who have got wheezing or immunocompromised, which Anupam talked about. What should be our approach? Ideally universal immunization, but because in a resource poor country and logistical reasons, I think we still stick to high risk approach, and the various associations across the globe have given their recommendation. We from Indian Academy of Pediatrics till now reserve influenza vaccine to high risk children above 6 months of age. Something very important for our critical care friends. Influenza is never regarded as a major illness till this 2009 pandemic, because throughout our medical curriculum there is hardly any talk on influenza. It is just a paragraph in our books which we read as another respiratory virus, but never a due importance is given to them. Secondly, at least in my 30 years of career, I have never written influenza as a cause of death in a death certificate. It is always pneumonia, ARDS, MODS. So that is why influenza has not been given a due importance, while it is one of the precipitating factors for all these conditions where have we high mortality. So therefore, influenza assumes good importance. Healthcare care workers are one of the high risk groups who should be receiving this vaccine, and unfortunately across the globe not more than 40% take this vaccine. Even when this H1N1 vaccine was made available to many of the institutions in multiple states in India, none of them came to get that vaccine, though there was a craving before the vaccine was available. And this is just to show you one of the examples where nosocomial H1N1 has been spread to an already immunocompromised child, and the literature is full of such examples. So that makes a case that at least healthcare workers must get an annual flu vaccination. So therefore, I think with this very short presentation, I would have been able to convince yourself that we do need to protect ourselves from influenza, not only for us, but also for the children we care about. And finally, a person who is very proactive about the vaccines, I would say all preventable diseases must be prevented. Thank you.